And this is all related to the gender recognition stuff that I was just talking about. Just to be clear, I'm not going off on a tangent any more than usual.
So, in relation to his former chair, his defence is, nobody told me, I didn't know, I didn't ask any questions. Is the Prime Minister now also going to claim that he was the...
Order, Prime. Mr Gullis, we heard enough last week. I can't hear what you're saying. I might not be able to hear what you're saying, but I can certainly see your mouth moving.
Bunch of children, Jesus Christ, come on.
So for his former chair, nobody told me, I didn't know, I didn't ask any questions. Is the Prime Minister now also going to claim that he's the only person completely unaware of serious allegations of bullying against the Deputy Prime Minister before he appointed him?
Yeah, Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister who's sat there, this is a nasty piece of work. He's just not a nice guy. And he's been against human rights for most of his career. He's wanted to repeal the Human Rights Act for a long time now. He's a nasty piece of work, but he's also got multiple allegations of bullying against him, just for context here. And so Rishi Sunak is going to engage in a bit of whataboutism, and that's where we come in.
But if he is so concerned about what people are saying, and is so concerned about behaviour in public life,
here it is.
then recently one of his own MPs was forced to speak out because being in his party had reminded her of being in an abusive relationship. And then his own office was caught undermining her.
We'll get to it.
He ought to be supporting her. And
they were caught undermining her because, you know, bigotry, you're not a victim if you're a bigot. It doesn't work like that.
Mr. Speaker, I noticed he didn't say anything about why one of his own MPs describes being in his own party.
And here's the thing. I don't like agreeing with Rishi Sunak, but honestly, Starmer's got to come down on a side on this. He's got to step forward and go, no, actually, I think that transphobia is wrong, or he's got to go, no, actually, I think that Rosie Duffield is right, and that basically we should move to legislate trans people out of existence. Because that's kind of what the positions are. I don't feel like you can say that you support trans rights and be quiet on the question of Rosie Duffield in the Labour Party. And it's a criticism I would make of Jeremy Corbyn as well. Jeremy Corbyn should have thrown Rosie Duffield out of the party, but they were so desperate to keep Canterbury, which previously has always been a Tory constituency. They didn't want to say anything. But let's talk about Rosie Duffield. What's being referred to here is Rosie Duffield's article that she wrote in Unheard, and the article in question is about women in the Labour Party, except it's not. It's about her right to be a transphobe in the Labour Party, and her complaining that she feels that she is a victim of abuse, because abuse from the Labour Party, because she isn't allowed to be transphobic. So let's have a look at that very article. This is it. It's written by Rosie Duffield. It was published on January 20th. And it's titled, "The Labour Party Has a Woman Problem. I know how it feels to be in an abusive relationship." And I want to be very clear from the start, I am not undermining Rosie Duffield's experiences with abuse. Wouldn't do that. Don't want to. But being the victim of abuse does not give you the right to be horrible to other people, to be a bigot to other people, to spread lies and misinformation about trans people. So this is us addressing her misinformation. So it begins, domestic abuse is about control and power and silencing someone. That is true. And you know who don't have power in our society, who don't have control? That's right. Trans people. Women don't have power, women don't have control, that's true as well. But trans people as well. It can take many forms. A text, a glance, a threat disguised as a promise. The idea is to manipulate you, to paralyze you. Yep, I essentially agree with that. I have lived through an abusive relationship and have spoken about it in Parliament. Yep. I am reminded of making a speech. I was reminded of making that speech earlier this week. The daily trauma that inspired it, how hard it was to make, and afterwards the overwhelming support of my colleagues. That was the Labour Party I joined. On Tuesday, when 2 of those colleagues traded that sympathy for aggression, shouting down women in the chamber, it felt like a very different Labour Party. I was defending the need to protect vulnerable women in single-sex spaces and had just criticised Scotland's gender reform bill when Ben Bradshaw yelled his disapproval at me. So, let's look at what was actually said. Right, let's have a look.
I welcome the government's invoking of Section 35 in this case, as the bill clearly conflicts with the Equality Act and would have repercussions for women across the UK.
Except it doesn't contradict with the Equalities Act. Like, it just doesn't. She is straight up wrong. This is a lie. It doesn't contradict the Equalities Act because it's not meant to address the things addressed in the Equalities Act. The Equalities Act defines, for example, trans women's right to access female bathrooms, or trans men's rights to access male bathrooms, and spaces that they need to go into. That's all defined in the Equalities Act, and TERFs like Rosie just don't agree with it. Like, so they pretend that it's not the case. However, the Gender Recognition Act is to do with what what sex is listed on your birth certificate, and that doesn't impact those things. Your access to spaces isn't impacted by those things, and she's about to go on to say very similar stuff.
Does the Secretary of State recognise the strength of feeling amongst women's rights groups and activists in Scotland that this bill seeks to allow anyone?
Okay, so first of all, strength of feeling. Strength of feeling is not a good argument for rejection of rights. So, like, I could say that people in the 1980s who were worried about about Section 28 being repealed, say, or who introduced Section 28, would say, "Oh yeah, but I'm worried about the promotion of gayness to children. I'm worried about the idea that children should be the idea of being gay should be promoted to children." Now, I've no doubt that those people had a great strength of feeling about the idea that their kids might be, indoctrinated into being gay, but that doesn't actually make it true. It's not a good argument in favour of that thing. The fact there is strength of feeling, like segregationists in the USA in the 1950s might have had strength of feeling, but strength of feeling, it doesn't add anything. These people are just wrong.
At all to legally self-identify as either sex and therefore enter all spaces, including those necessarily segregated by sex, such as domestic violence settings, changing rooms in prisons. And
so, someone with a gender recognition certificate that says male legally can enter a changing room, a prison, or a domestic violence shelter for women, assuming that they identify as a trans person, as a trans woman. There's legally, there's nothing stopping them. This bill does not impact that. She is just straight up lying.
And given the previous UQ, does he not understand how vitally important this is at the moment?
Well, Mr. Dev.
So that was her whole statement, and that was her being shouted down. You can't really pick it up very well because on the microphones, but she'll talk about it. I just wanted to give that as a clear statement. Okay, so she says in her article, "I was defending the need to protect a vulnerable woman in single-sex spaces and had just criticised Scotland's gender reform bill when Ben Bradshaw yelled his disapproval at me, yet because the things you were saying were objectively wrong." Anyway, sitting nearby, Lloyd Russell Moyle went puce, perhaps less surprising, and started to heckle every woman who spoke of their similar concerns. Weird. Every woman bigot who stood up got heckled after they expressed their belief based on their, firm foundation of ew, trans people. Not anything that's based in like the reality of the situation, which is this literally just impacts people's birth certificates, which impacts their right to get married and their right to die in dignity. That is it. It has nothing to do with single-sex spaces. Yeah. So like the fact that people who stand up and go, but what about single-sex spaces are getting heckled isn't surprising. It's because what they're saying is just wrong. Interesting how she's not mentioning the woman that stood up in favour of trans rights who didn't get heckled. True. It's almost like being a bigot is quite likely to get you heckled. Later, when Miriam Cates, a Conservative MP and friend, spoke of her concern around safeguarding, he accused her of being a bigot before crossing over to the Tory side of the chamber. That is very ironic phrasing from somebody who has been speculated as one day going to cross over to the Tory side. To sit on the side benches very close to her, staring as if to intimidate her. Which, it's not impossible that Lloyd Russell Moyle could have some sexist tendencies. Yeah, fine. That still doesn't make your bigotry right. I recognise that I failed to control my passion, was how he later apologised. In other words, he had done nothing wrong. Yeah, because he hadn't done anything wrong. Because being a bigot is the wrong position. And heckling bigots is the right position. You should heckle the male ones as much as the female ones, yeah, sure. But there's nothing wrong with heckling a bigot. It wasn't his fault, it was ours for daring to disagree with him. Yeah, this is... Yeah, people in the House of Commons shout at each other when they disagree. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. Breaking news. I know Lloyd is a really nice person. Yeah, I've had a couple of chats with him. I moderated a conversation that he had at one point on a Labour Party forum. Right. Lloyd is great. He's my constituency neighbour. Lots of Lloyd fans in the chat. Excellent. Anyway, it wasn't his fault. It was ours for daring to disagree with him. Look what you made me do, as my ex-partner would say when I had caused him to explode. Yeah, this comparison with abuse is actually really disgusting. So I feel like it's worth emphasising. Yeah, this is just her position, but in reverse, because J.K. Rowling and all of her pals like Julie Bindel are allying with the far right, and their argument, their defence is always, well, look what you trans rights activists made us do. You made us ally with the Nazis. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. We didn't make you ally with those people. You just decided that suddenly, when it came to trans rights, that you didn't want to respect trans people. You'll allow it to go up to a certain point, up to a point where it protects you, but you don't want minority rights when it protects trans people. After Tuesday's outburst came the silence. Not from Russell Moyle, but from Keir Starmer's office. I don't know what she was expecting Keir Starmer to do. Was she expecting Keir Starmer to go, oh, no, actually, I'm going to intervene on this issue where you got heckled when you stood up and made a statement that is, like, objectively incorrect? What would you like Keir Starmer to do, Rosie? Do you want him to decry heckling in the House of Commons? He could probably do that every day. Same as decrying sexism in the House of Commons. He could do that every day. Yeah, I agree that women shouldn't be shouted down. But the thing is, being a bigot isn't something that gives you special protected status. Your transphobia in this case has nothing to do with any claim that you might make to be a victim of sexism. It's a cycle I've come to know well. First speak up in defence of women's sex-based rights, and then face the consequences alone. Yeah, you should be alone if you're a bigot. That's reasonable. I agree with that. And the whole sex-based rights, yeah, this is a dog whistle. It's like race is real. It's the equivalent of doing that, but for transphobia rather than racism. Like we all know what it means. I'm just a humble Yankee, but isn't the Commons really like really shouty and informal? Yeah, it is. People get shouted down in the Commons all the time. But she's probably right. There's a lot of sexism in the Commons. I could agree with her there. But it has absolutely shit all to do with being transphobic. Like, transphobia will be shouted down because people don't like transphobia, and because it actively harms one of the most vulnerable groups here in the UK. And as the Scottish pointed out when they did their investigation into the potential harms of introducing Gender Recognition Act reform, the opposition don't have any arguments. Like, you'll notice that so much of this is just, it's addressing the backlash to their opinion. It's not actually addressing the issue that they want to talk about, because, to put it simply, their arguments against Gender Recognition Act reform aren't very good. They haven't got a reason to oppose it, realistically. Okay, so the only message I've had from the Labour Party since the debate was from Deputy Whip's office yesterday. I was chastised for not attending a routine statutory instruments committee sitting because I was busy being shouted down by 2 Labour MPs and completely forgot. Why would you print that in an article? That's just embarrassing. Why would you go, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't have time to make it to dinner, Mum. I was too busy being transphobic on the internet, or being transphobic in the Houses of Parliament. What? It's got nothing to do with why you missed a meeting. You're just like blaming trans people for whatever you can now. Like, oh, trans people were trying to gain some rights. Bloody people made me miss my meeting. What? I genuinely stunned that she wrote that in the article and was like, yeah, this is why I missed my meeting. Yeah, no, Rosie, you missed the meeting because you forgot the meeting, which is fine. I don't think you should face any consequences for that. But don't blame it on people who were debating you and heckling you in the House of Commons for being a bigot. Like, don't blame people who are heckling you for being a bigot that you missed a meeting. Just say, I missed the meeting. Or don't include it in an article that you're writing. I don't know. Anyway. To be fair, Emily Thornberry, Shadow Attorney General, did come out and say the debate wasn't Labour's finest hour, before clarifying that this was because it distracted from the most vulnerable in society, who are trans people. Based. Love Emily Thornberry. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Emily. Like, that they might not be the most vulnerable in all situations, but I don't think she's saying that. I think she's saying in the context of this debate, they're the most vulnerable. And it's their rights that are going to be impeded upon. Keir, meanwhile, said nothing. It was as if I didn't exist, but then perhaps the leader's office wishes I didn't. So much of this is like self-pitying and self-praising. It's stunning. I should have been the perfect Labour MP. I can't believe that was the next sentence after I just said that. I should have been the perfect Labour MP. Okay, Rosie, okay. Like, usually the perfect Labour MP isn't quite so bigoted. I was a single mum. I was on benefits which topped up my salary as a teaching assistant. I understood hardship and what ordinary women wanted and needed from politics. The year before I was elected, I earned less than £10,000. On my first day in Westminster, I had to borrow money to pay for the train fare. I was a woman who knew what struggle meant. And I was a member of Parliament, having turned a true blue Tory seat red for the first time in history. And that is why neither Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer have gone after her, and they should have done. She should be deselected. It's so obvious she should be deselected. She is a bigot. It is obvious she is a bigot, and the only reason she hasn't been deselected so far is because Labour don't want to risk losing that seat. So, what did the Labour Party make of my historic win? Well, it was exciting at first. My face was plastered on all the big screens at conference. They showed a film of my victory when Labour's leading men such as Jeremy Corbyn, Len McCluskey or Ian Nicol joyfully exclaimed, "We won Canterbury." There were cheers and a standing ovation. They were all used that victory in their speeches, but I rarely heard mention of my name. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but I don't think that's necessarily a something that's unique to you. I think people on election night just go, we won, you know, like the constituency of constituency in Nottingham. Usually the name isn't brought up because it's not what people are focusing on election night. Not one of them had been to Canterbury to campaign. Nobody in the party had expected me to win. Didn't Owen Jones go and campaign for you? I swear Owen Jones went and campaigned for Rosie Duffield, because he apologised for it later on. So I wouldn't say that nobody in the party had expected you to win, and that none of them had been to Canterbury to campaign, because Owen Jones, who's a Labour member, went with you to campaign. He's like quite a prominent figure in the Labour Party. Alright, he doesn't hold official position, but come on. The total outsider, the only red dot in a sea of blue, was only here because of the swell of Corbyn mania. 2 years on, when that bubble burst with the party's crushing defeat and the rejection of Corbyn, my tiny majority increased 10 times. Then I liked a tweet. It was fairly innocuous. Piers Morgan had replied, "Do you mean woman?" to a tweet advising individuals with a cervix to get screened for cancer. I think I probably knew there was a chance it would cause some trouble, but it seemed a safe way to enter this debate publicly. Yeah, there's a reason that it might have caused some backlash, and that's that you're completely erasing trans men who were born with female parts, and so have a cervix, and then later on come to identify as men. Trans men have cervixes, but if you address an advert to women as opposed to people with a cervix, you're excluding trans men. There's no real reason to do it. Just be nice. Why can't you just be nice and just be inclusive and go, hey, we're going to talk to individuals with a cervix. Individuals with a cervix should get screened for cervical cancer. There's no reason really to oppose this, like, and to go, do you mean women? No, if we'd have meant women, we would have said women, because some women are trans, and so don't need to be screened for cervical cancer. That's when the floodgates really opened. Faced with a tsunami of online vitriol, including calls for my job and even my life, I then posted a tweet of my own, asking why it was transphobic to say that only women have a cervix. Because you're completely erasing trans men. What? Why would you need to do that? Anywho, what happened next was a blur. I received more threats. The alarm bells went off in Pink News that another TERF was in town. Brackets happy to be part of the gang. Owen Jones issued a grovelling apology for attending my election rally. Yeah, I thought Owen Jones campaigned for her. Not as sorry as I am. These people are obsessed with Owen Jones. It's really interesting. While seemingly every Labour University student group called on the party to stop me being an MP, obviously not students of how politics works. The party can literally deselect you, Rosie. That is something that the party can do. I don't know what this comment is about. Obviously not students of how politics works. No, the party does have the power to deselect you. That's something that the party can do if enough people call for it. But from the Labour Party, silence. They think that the transgender debate is nothing more than a culture war issue, a weapon used by the Tories to whip up division. Because it is. It is. And the transgender debate is trans people fighting for their rights and people like you trying to legislate them out of existence. It is a smokescreen that has nothing to do with women's rights. Yeah, that's correct. Ordinary people don't care about mixed-sex changing rooms. Okay, on the issue of mixed-sex changing rooms, I don't see anything wrong with completely mixed-sex changing rooms. That's really hard to say. Mixed-sex changing rooms. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think you can have mixed-sex changing rooms, and you can just have them cubicled. Just have cubicles in mixed-sex changing rooms. because I'm always blown away by this idea that I should be more comfortable changing in front of a cis man than I should a cis woman. I'm not comfortable changing in front of either. I just want my own space, and I feel like I should be entitled to that privacy. And it kind of solves the whole issue of, like, should we have mixed sex changing rooms? Well, yeah, but you should allow everybody to have their own individual privacy. It's the obvious answer. Anyway, or the prospect of men entering women's refuges, or the erasure of the word cervix. The erasure of the word cervix? Is anyone trying to erase the word? I feel like we're trying to make the word cervix more used. If you're saying people who have a cervix should get screened for cancer, you're saying that it should be more used, not erased. And by the way, this is like a reflection of the way that homophobes used to go, that they're erasing marriage. No, we're just expanding what the definition is, and expanding our definitions, our understanding, in order to be inclusive of minorities. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the thing is most people don't get to read this stuff. What they get is they get the second-hand media information of, like, Rosie Duffield is shouted down in the House of Commons after expressing concerns about men in women's spaces, and it's like, no, actually, when you read through it, it's clear that she doesn't have a fucking clue what she's talking about. Like, not even the vaguest idea. Like, I'm not that well informed on this, and I can see that this is nonsense because no one is trying to erase the word cervix. For God's sake. Anyway, what this debate is really about, women are told, is bigotry and prejudice. Because it is. I know that is not the case. Does anyone who's a bigot think of themselves as being a bigot? I feel like it's a universal thing that bigots don't actually identify as bigots. Like Tommy Robinson, the EDL, the BNP, none of these people go, yes, we're bigots, except doing it in a sort of sarky way when they're called bigots. I really don't think that the argument that I know I'm not a bigot is a good argument. You should actually ground it in an analysis of power dynamics and social relationships. Alright, let's have a look. Then I think of flowers. After I liked that tweet and started to speak up, the flowers started to arrive, more than 350 bunches in just 2 days. And there were messages, thousands of them, from women and men telling me they were grateful for somebody speaking out. Speaking out. Jesus Christ. From people who voted Labour, Tory, Lib Dem and Green. I'd be interested to know how many of those were from the Tories, though, because, yeah, most of the transphobia comes from the right wing. Every day, survivors of domestic violence still message me, telling me not to stop. Okay, cool. Plenty of trans people are survivors of domestic violence. Plenty of allies of trans people are survivors of domestic violence. Doesn't increase the validity of your argument at all. Keir may dismiss this as a culture war issue, but for these women it is most definitely not. Yeah, because bigots don't actually think they're bigots. Again, not really groundbreaking stuff from Rosie here. And I know I'm not the only MP in the party who thinks this. I'm just the one who feels I have nothing to lose by speaking out. After all, there's no front bench job on offer for the only Labour MP in my county. Yeah, this has nothing to do with, like, she has nothing to lose by speaking out. Well, clearly she doesn't want to be deselected. Like, obviously, because she probably wouldn't regain her seat if she was deselected. Unless she joined the Conservatives, then she might take her seat. But allegedly she doesn't want to do that. Many of us know that self-identifying as a woman does not make a person a biological woman who shares our lived experience. Okay, so this, Rosie, is called a straw man, because trans people don't think that biological women or cis women share the lived experience of trans women. That's not a thing. The same way that, like, a black woman doesn't share the lived experience of a white woman. They're still both women, but the idea that they have the exact same experience is not something that trans people claim. Trans people aren't claiming to be biological women. But for obvious reasons, these views are not voiced outside of closed rooms or private and secret WhatsApp groups. Yet, is it because everyone goes, hang on, that's not actually what trans people think at all. You're just being a bigot. No trans people deny their biology. Trans people spend like thousands on surgery. It's hardly denying their biology. Anyway, even there, the most senior MPs often do not post a single word. They know exactly what's at stake, and not many of them want to be me. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be like this deranged and obsessed with trans people either. So for now, they mostly remain silent. Again, this is like classic bigotry. It's like, we're the silent majority. It's the thing that Trump supporters do as well. They go and QAnoners. They go, and then on the day of reckoning, the silent majority will rise up. They seem to believe that they're on the side of the majority without any actual evidence. Okay, for all Corbyn's faults, and I was an outspoken critic of all of them, his party's General Secretary, Jenny Formby, came to every meeting of the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party that she was invited to, even when she was going through chemotherapy. That's good. I like Jenny Formby. She's generally a good person. David Evans, her replacement, has been 2 or 3 times, yet we are the biggest group in the party, the largest group of women in Parliament, and we all won or held onto our seats against the odds in 2019. Who knows? Perhaps we may even know a thing or two about politics or winning. And perhaps, just maybe, endocrinologists and people who treat kids for gender dysphoria, paediatricians who treat kids for gender dysphoria, perhaps they know something about gender dysphoria. Perhaps gender clinicians know something about gender dysphoria, and we should maybe listen to their opinion. His suggestion that us ladies would do well to read the latest doorstep scripts written by staff didn't exactly go down well. Complaining about the Labour Party machinery. Something that perhaps I would actually agree with her on. I'm not keen on the current makeup of the Labour Party myself, but for very different reasons. Is it starting to look like Labour has a woman problem? It certainly is for the 7,000 strong group of women members, councillors and activists who made up Labour Women's Declaration and had a stall at the party last year's party conference refused. Yeah, because, you know, bigotry isn't exactly welcome. So it is for lesbian Labour, who were also stopped from exhibiting at last year's conference. It is for Dr. Karen Angala Smith, the formidable feminist campaigner who compiles a list of women killed in the UK each year, which is then read out in Parliament by Jess Phillips every International Women's Day, who had her membership rejected after she made a few gender-critical joke tweets featuring kittens. Yeah, and also because she founded Women's Place UK, which is a hate group. Like, they literally just exist to be horrible to trans people. You know, this is like Jimmy Savile did loads of charity work levels of, like, whataboutism. It's not relevant. Like, why was she rejected from the party? Oh, because she founded a hate group. Yeah, that could be it. Okay. And of course, it is, for me, ostracised for voicing not only my own personal opinions, but those of thousands of others who are starting to question the party they have dedicated so much of their lives to. Yeah, mostly because of dishonest framing. That's what a lot of this boils down to. In each case, a woman who dared to voice an opinion was ignored or neglected. So, daring to voice an opinion. So, someone who is daring to voice an opinion. I think you could pretty much defend anything using this. I think I could go, oh yeah, so just imagine I'm a woman for a second, and I went into the Houses of Parliament and I started making a speech about, like, defending eugenics. I could easily say I was a woman who dared to voice my opinion was ignored and neglected. No, you were a bigot. Don't do bigotry. It's really that simple. One of the traits of being in an abusive relationship is stonewalling. The abuser will go quiet for days on end. Yeah, that doesn't really translate to people isolating you because you're being a bigot. Like, this is like the person who never gets invited to parties because they're really weird when they come out, and they're really, like, I don't know, like, horrible or just odd, creepy to the people that they go out with. Yeah, this is like them complaining, well, I never get invited to parties, this is a form of abuse. No, you're just either you're creepy in the case of the party, or you're a bigot in the case of Rosie Duffield. Like, no one wants to hang out with you because you're obsessive and weird, and the transphobia has really tainted your brand. They will shoo, not speak to you, turn their back on you. Trust me when I say I don't take this lightly. But what I feel now, after 6 years of being cold-shouldered by the Labour Party, conjures memories of how I felt in that abusive relationship. Have you noticed at this point how little this has to do with trans people or Gender Recognition Act reform? She's barely mentioned what Gender Recognition Act reform actually does. Well, she hasn't. She's lied about what Gender Recognition Act reform actually does, and then says that people who oppose her lying about it are making her feel like she's in an abusive relationship. No, Rosie, people are opposing it because you keep lying. You keep misrepresenting what's going on, and you keep advocating for objective harm to trans people. When I come home at night, I feel low-level trauma at my political isolation. I feel like I feel sorry for anybody who feels that they are isolated, but I really struggle to feel any sympathy for this woman. She is just a bigot, going, trans women aren't women. Why is everybody being horrible to me? Well, because you're being horrible to trans people. Sitting on the front bench with Keir are MPs who defended Corbyn or remained silent when the rest of us were calling him out for his anti-Semitism. Not even getting into that. Sitting on our front bench is an MP who was voted in as a Conservative. That's true. Not sitting on the front bench, however, is a single MP who believes that biological sex can't be erased at the stroke of a pen. Did you read this through and actually think, yeah, that sounds good, I'll publish that? Because I don't know a single trans person who believes that biological sex is what's being erased at the stroke of a pen. Like, what do you think that Gender Recognition Act reform actually does, Rosie? Gender Recognition Act reform isn't like you go into a building, you say, I'm a woman now, and then you sign a bit of paper and suddenly you've got a vagina. That's not how it works, Rosie. At the stroke of a pen. Like, no one believes that's the case. For God's sake. Trans women are not claiming to be biologically cis women. They wouldn't spend thousands on surgery if they were. But again, you have to misrepresent the argument because your own argument just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. To go into a workplace when nothing you say or experience as a politician or woman is of any worth, what's progressive about that? So here's the thing, like, no one's saying that what you say or experience as a woman or politician isn't of any worth. Like, the experiences of cis women are very valuable and should be taken very seriously, and they're going to have very different experiences of misogyny from the kind of misogyny that trans women will face. But that doesn't mean that either side is being erased if you respect both of them. Like, it's progressive to respect both of them. It's like saying, oh, marriage is being erased because we're allowing gay people to get married. No, you can just coexist. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Anyway, I may not be quite as radical a feminist as my wonderful friend Julie Bindel, but what I am is a progressive left-wing MP. You're not progressive, Rosie. Who cares about ordinary women and now wonders whether the party I represent is capable of standing up for them. I am not going to join the Conservatives or the Lib Dems or the Greens. She's going to join the Conservatives one day. It's just like a matter of time, or she might just skip the Conservatives and go straight and join a group that's like aligned with UKIP. But this party doesn't always feel like home. In 2019, it was hard enough trying to convince my constituents that Labour wasn't anti-Semitic. In the next election, when they inevitably ask whether Labour is sexist, I'm not sure I'll be able to do the same. And her evidence for this is 2 MPs shouted at her when she was saying something that is objectively incorrect about Gender Recognition Act reform. Like, not even mildly like, oh, well, you know, it could be interpreted this way or it could be interpreted this way. No, what she was saying was objectively incorrect, and she was heckled for it. Lots of people get heckled in the House of Commons. A lot of the time sexism is involved. Yeah, sure. But that's really not an argument for why the Labour Party as a whole is sexist. Really isn't. Nor does the Labour Party have a woman problem.